Welcome back to All That and More, a podcast from the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. On this week's episode, Cullen Bird explores the heroes in the sky. We humbly acknowledge that All That and More is recorded on Treaty 8 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dene, and unceded territory of the Métis.
Actually, what I'd like to do is I'm going to spin around your way. Tail's
Okay.
clear?
Yep, tail's clear with the exception.
And I want to put the tail on that trail.
Okay.
That's the sound of two local hero pilots, Roger Jameson and Ken Dewick, working out how to land an Airbus H-135 helicopter at night in a grassy clearing in the boreal forest. It's not too far from Highway 63, but their landing spot has no lights, no pavement, and no signalers. The two pilots have to use their experience and onboard equipment to set down this precious machine, training for the kind of medical emergency they have to answer in Wood Buffalo.
And I'm going to put the nose right at this intersection here.
Okay.
Going down.
Yeah, go forward just a little bit. That's good right there. Okay, so this would simulate if we had to pick up a patient, we would shut down and disembark to pick up whatever we had here.
HERO stands for a Helicopter Emergency Response Organization, and its mission is to provide 24/7 emergency medical flights in the region. There is never a charge to patients, and HERO can be called upon for floods, fires, and search and rescue. My name is Cullen Bird, and in this episode we will be talking about our region's only helicopter medevac service.
So I'm Andrea Spring, and I'm the Executive Director of the Local Hero Foundation, the helicopter medevac for northeastern Alberta.
And what would you say is HERO's mission?
Our goal is to save lives by saving time. It's a huge region with few roads and lots of rivers, and people manage to go everywhere or work everywhere in the region, and sometimes bad things happen.
And how does HERO operate on a regular basis?
Local Hero is a 24/7 operation. There are two pilots on duty at all times and ready to lift off within 8 minutes if they have to. So we have a day shift with two pilots and we have a night shift with two pilots.
While one pilot flies, the secondary pilot handles communications and the radio, looking for visual signals and dangers, and generally assists the pilot. When the helicopter lands at the scene of the emergency, the secondary pilot can help load the patient on board.
There are two paramedics from the Fort McMurray Fire Department on every flight. We couldn't do this program without Regional Emergency Services. They are our partner. As well, the regional municipality supports us as a major sponsor.
The paramedics carry medical supplies and vital medications with them as they board each flight. And though staffing the service 24/7 is a challenge, HERO has been able to attract the experienced pilots it needs.
These pilots have a lot of hours under their belt. They've reached a point in their career where they're not interested in building hours. They are skilled pilots who have worked maybe all over the country, in various countries, perhaps in war zones, way up in the Arctic. They've done all sorts of more difficult jobs, and they're ready for something a little more rewarding.
HERO will be celebrating its 10th anniversary in July. The 24/7 helicopter medevac service grew out of a decades-long need that became even more pressing during the oil sands boom. Andrea's husband, Paul Spring, the owner of Phoenix Heliflight, had been flying helicopter medevacs in the region on a charter basis for decades, whenever he was available.
The catch was he could only fly during the day legally, and people get sick and have incidences at night as well. And there were too many people dying at night. So after many years of this and being on call all that time, he decided the region deserved a dedicated machine that was available night or day to go all through the region.
Throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s, the region's population was booming, and so were the calls for emergency medical flights. Paul Spring gathered together executives from various oil sands companies in Calgary for a meeting, and all agreed to support a dedicated medevac service.
That support wasn't immediate, but eventually people are coming on board, and certain companies have been major supporters for at least 9 years.
Hero received 105 medevac calls in 2022 and flew a total of 62.7 hours responding to those calls. Not all calls result in a full flight. Sometimes Hero is stood down by dispatch as the situation becomes clearer. Flying into a scene in northern Alberta is much different than a medevac further south, Spring says, as there are more roads, more ambulances, and the patient might already be prepped for transport.
We're not doing interfacility transfers, we are doing scene calls where there is no helipad, where there are no lights, and there may be wild horses running by, which is quite a sight. So it's the remoteness and the terrain, and it's cold. Our machine can operate at very cold temperatures. I think minus 35 is our current limit. But it is more challenging when you have to package a patient and keep their IV going and keep them safe when it's that cold out.
Phoenix, Hellflight, and Hero, how are they different? What's the distinction?
Yeah, it is confusing. Phoenix Heliflight operates for the foundation. As a charity, Local Hero cannot get a certificate to operate, and so they pay a monthly service agreement, and Phoenix Heliflight provides a place for the machine, hires the pilots, does the maintenance, buys the parts, and makes it work. And if the Hero machine is down for scheduled maintenance, Phoenix Heliflight machine can be put on duty with a Phoenix pilot during the daytime, but the Phoenix pilots are not night endorsed.
Hero is able to operate at night thanks to the military-grade night vision goggles its pilots use and the compatible interior lighting on its dedicated medical helicopter.
It really makes it possible for them to see things you would not think possible. So they can fly in the very darkest of night. If they are searching for someone who is lost at night and that person happens to have their cell phone on, they can see it miles away. If the person has been able to start a very small fire, it's extremely visible through the night vision goggles.
Here is Hero pilot Ken Duick explaining how useful that night vision equipment is, recounting a nighttime search for a snowmobile accident in the bush.
The gentleman called 911, but the way cell tower interception works is sometimes it can't always give you the exact GPS location that the ping is showing.
Oh, okay.
So we knew they were on the river, so we just decided to fly out along the river, and about 7 miles out, one of them had a pen light and put the pen light up in as like through the trees. Mm-hmm. And was just shining it like that. And we could see that from 7 miles out with the goggles.
Oh, wow.
You couldn't have seen it unaided without the goggles, but with the goggles, we could see it. So that's how we found them.
What would you say is Hero's role and contribution to emergency response in the region?
Well, nearly 100% of Hero's calls are rural in nature or to remote areas. And Hero is a really vital service when there is an emergency that requires speed or requires something done in the middle of the night. It's a real lifesaver, and if it's not saving a life, it is certainly improving the health outcomes of patients that are flown. It provides a whole different level of security for the residents in the region.
Can you describe to me some of the types of calls that Hero is needed for?
The Hero team is only called when there is someone critically injured or seriously ill, so those are called code yellow or code red patients. So there is an exception if someone is in an area that the ground ambulance can't reach, and say they have a badly broken leg and a trip out by ATV or snowmobile would be extremely painful. or someone has a condition that would deteriorate, then local hero would be called.
The Airbus H-135 helicopter is an impressive machine, with a maximum range of 635 kilometers and capable of a cruising speed of 254 kilometers per hour. Apart from its 2 pilots, it can carry 1 patient stretcher and 2 paramedics. Hero's dedicated helicopter can reach every community in Wood Buffalo within an hour, with the exception of Fort Chipewyan, which is just over an hour away.
It can fly all the way into northwestern Saskatchewan. We're often called there because we are the closest machine for calls there, or we have also flown into the southeast corner of the territories. One time we had to land on a sandbar in a river for a barge captain who was having a heart attack and flew them to Fort Smith. So our pilots' flight plan, they know where all their possible fueling points are, and so they hop from spot to spot so that they can go further. And it doesn't take long to refuel.
Speaking to the difficulty of emergency response in the region, is there anything that you think people underappreciate or perhaps don't know about what it requires to respond to emergencies in the region?
Well, you could say that saving lives is priceless, but I happen to know that there's quite a price tag on it. So getting the program sustainably funded has been a challenge, but we are making good traction as a charity. Half of our battle is awareness.
And how has that battle been going?
Well, every year it's a little bit better. We're getting more and more support from some of our industry partners in the oil sands and some multi-year agreements.
Part of the struggle for financial stability is acquiring financial support from new sources, such as the federal government. One of HERO's major goals is to provide more equitable health care for rural and remote communities. Many members of those communities are Indigenous. Andrea says HERO has requested annual federal funding to support this work.
The Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, number 18 to 24, nicely lay it out in terms of more equitable health care for the Indigenous population, and that is a big goal of ours.
Those health-oriented calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which are widely available online, need to be read as a whole to understand their full significance. They demand recognition, accountability, and responsibility for achieving equitable Indigenous health outcomes from all levels of government, especially the federal government. One of the calls to action is for the federal government, in consultation with Indigenous peoples, to, quote, establish measurable goals to identify and close the gaps in health outcomes between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal communities, and to publish annual progress reports and assess long-term trends, unquote. Those efforts would include indicators such as life expectancy and the availability of appropriate health services. Andrea sees a role for HERO in closing the access gap to emergency medical care for rural and remote residents in Wood Buffalo.
How does HERO contribute to more equitable healthcare by providing its services?
By time to medical care, getting the 2 paramedics with their medical supplies and their expertise and their critical drugs to the person right on scene. The paramedics carry heart medication that they can deliver that used to have to be done in emergency. So they can get that person some immediate life-saving medication. And then they can be treating the patient en route to the hospital. And by being able to land right at the helipad, they are whisked right into emergency and get the treatment that they need, as opposed to what could be hours in an ambulance.
If HERO is able to get sustainable financial support, it won't just mean HERO can continue its current work with less financial anxiety. Andrea says that stable funding would allow HERO to upgrade its services.
When we can have certain levels of financial support confirmed, it will allow us to take the next step, because our dream is to have a larger machine. So when we can assume the payments for a different machine, we will. We want a machine that can carry 2 patients or a parent and a child. Sometimes a parent will refuse to let their child go alone, which is understandable. Or an elder can be accompanied by someone who can help explain what's going on and keep them company. And the machine we have our eye on would also be able to fly a little further before it needed refueling, and flies a little bit faster.
Of course, much of HERO's current financial support comes from the community. At this year's fundraiser party on May 6th, the first since the pandemic began, HERO raised more than $220,000. That includes more than 30 personal sponsorship pledges from community members. To put that in context, Andrea says it costs $4 to $5 million a year to keep HERO in the air and saving lives. Running a 24/7 helicopter medevac service is expensive.
So what does financial sustainability look like to you?
For me to not have a job,
Oh,
it would mean that the program was completely funded, that it was a given that there was provincial and federal and municipal money to support this life-saving program, rather than having to throw parties and car shows and create campaigns to raise money for something that a lot of people think is covered. I don't believe there should be a charge for the patient, but I do not think that it should be a charity. So that is my dream, that the program is financially stable and it's got the machine it needs and the staff it needs. That would be perfect.
anything you'd like to say in summary?
The local HERO team really appreciates the support of this community. The people who know about the program and the service, or who have been helped by it, or who have a family member or friend, are very loyal and help spread awareness of the program, and we really appreciate that.
While HERO works towards its next step, its pilots will continue their work, flying over the region, landing in the hard-to-reach spots, and providing vital, fast transportation to emergency care.
All right, well, I'll do the takeoff.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we'll do takeoff in the same direction we came in from.
Okay.
We'll stay to the left of the power lines.
Okay.
And pre-takeoff checks.
All right, pre-takeoff checks in progress. We're outside of their zone, right?
On a tower?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still monitoring them.
Yeah, okay. Just your brief, sir, and that's good for the takeoff brief.
So I'm going to get up a little bit, 50 feet, and I'll orient back down to the direction we're going.
Okay.
And I'll give you collective,
Roger.
and you'll set takeoff power. We'll just leave 120 is good here.
Yep.
Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, coming up.
Join us next time for more exciting stories from the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo.